You know, sometimes I stay up late and I get to thinking, should federal employees be loyal to the Constitution or to the president? Welcome to the Chinese New Year. This is week 7 of 52 bills, and I am your host, Cassie Clayton. I would like to talk about a bill called the Civil Service Act. Why? Why would I want to talk about this bill? How do employees of the federal government, federal employees, civil servants, how do they get into office? And when they are in office, who do they swear loyalty to? Is it like the military? Or is it like when you join a tech company or work for your local lumber yard? I think what we're going to find today is they actually function through the Constitution. And then who is the Constitution for? We're going to look through it together and see what we can uncover. Right now, most federal employees are part of what's called the competitive service. That means they're hired through a merit-based process, they have civil service protections, and they cannot be fired for political reasons. So, why are we having to see all of a sudden a bill in the Senate, S.134, which says agencies cannot move those jobs into the accepted service where employees have fewer protections unless very specific conditions are met? Well, what is the accepted service? We're going to need to get into some details. So, let me take you over and show you what's going on, my friends. Let's just pop right in to the bill text. This is still from our 119th Congress during the first session, and this is Senate Bill 134 to place limitations on accepting positions from the competitive service and for other purposes. And I got to tell you, I'm going to need to know what a competitive service is and make sure that we have those right definitions. Let's start with USA Jobs, shall we? And let's go look up a couple of definitions. The federal government consists of 3 types of services: the competitive service, the accepted service, and the senior executive service. Okay. Not clear yet? That's fine. Now we're going further. The competitive service positions are positions subject to the civil service laws passed by Congress to ensure that applicants and employees receive fair and equal treatment in the hiring process. In the competitive service, individuals must go through a competitive hiring process, competitive examining, before being appointed, which is open to all applicants. This process may consist of a written test, an evaluation of the individual's education experience, and or an evaluation of other attributes necessary for successful performance in the position to be filled. Interesting. The accepted service. The accepted service positions are any federal or civil service positions which are not in the competitive service or senior executive service. Accepted service agencies set their own qualification requirements and are not subject to the appointment, pay, and classification rules in Title V. And we're going to have to go look up Title V. United States Code. However, they are subject to veterans' preference. We should look that up too. Okay, we're going to open this one. It's just going to be a full study day. It's a shorter bill. There are a number of ways to be appointed to the accepted service, such as appointed under the authority defined by the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. That's the OPM. We heard a lot about that this past year. As accepted, as, veterans recruitment appointment, or being appointed to a position defined by OPM as accepted. Attorneys. are in that category. More information can be found about accepted service in Title V, United States Code, and it's giving us these specific locations. 2103, parts 213. The Senior Executive Service is a corps of executives selected for their leadership qualifications and charged with leading the continuing transformation of government. These leaders possess well-honed executive skills and share a broad perspective of government and a public service commitment, which is grounded in the Constitution. As leaders of our federal civilian workforce, senior executives strive each day to create a more citizen-centered, result-oriented federal government. And then it's talking about special appointed authorities. There's additional resources. Okay, so I'll keep this page up because we'll come back to it probably, and I have linked it in the notes, so I'll have it later for us to go back into. Veterans preference. With veterans preference, you may receive preference over non-veteran applicants in the hiring process. Veterans preference can be used when applying to permanent and temporary positions in both the competitive and accepted service of the executive branch. 3 different types of veterans preferences: disabled, non-disabled, sole survivorship. So this bill was introduced by several senators, and it was read twice, and then it was referred to the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. And I believe it is likely still there. If we go and look, we can look in a couple of different places. Of course, we can see that it was introduced. Actions, it was in January of last year, read twice and referred to the committee. It's not gone anywhere since. It's been a year. That is also what plural policy is telling us, the same thing. A bill to place limitations on accepting positions from the competitive service and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. This act may be cited as the Saving the Civil Service Act. Limitations on accepting positions from competitive service and transferring positions. Definitions we need. In this section, the term agency means any department, agency, or instrumentality of the federal government. The term competitive service has the meaning given the term in Section 2102 of Title V of the United States Code. Let's pop into our codes, Title V, Section 2102 to start. Into the definitions. 2102, the competitive service consists of, so this is the definition of what the competitive service is. The term competitive service has the meaning given in the term in Section 2102 of Title V. Okay, so this is saying they are using the exact same definition of competitive service as is in Title V, Section 2102. And when we can go over here to read that, we can see this is the definition that they are using. All service positions in the executive branch except positions which are specifically accepted from the competitive service or by or under statute. Positions to which appointments are made by nomination or confirmation by the Senate, unless the Senate otherwise directs, and positions in the senior executive service. Civil service positions not in the executive branch, which are specifically included in the competitive service by statute, and positions in the government of the District of Columbia, which are specifically included in the competitive service statute. Notwithstanding subsection A, 1, and B of this section, the competitive service includes positions to which appointments are made by nomination for confirmation by the Senate, when specifically included therein by statute, as used in other acts of Congress. Classified civil service or classified service means competitive service. You know what I would love to see, though? The civil service consists of all appointed positions in the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the government of the United States, except positions in the uniformed services. So these are not in civil service. The military is not in civil service. All right, continuing on. The term director means the director of the Office of Personnel Management, and the term accepted service has the meaning given in Section 2103 of Title V. So if we had just looked at competitive, now if we go back over and we look at accepted, for the purpose of this title, the accepted service consists of those civil service positions which are not in the competitive service or the senior executive service. As used in other acts of Congress, unclassified civil service or unclassified service means the accepted service. This section is supplied for convenience. The accepted service has come to mean all employees not in the competitive service for whatever reason. Let's continue. Limitations. A position in the competitive service may not be accepted from the competitive service unless that position is placed in any of Schedules A through E as described in Section 6.2 of Title V Code of Federal Regulations as in effect on September 30th, 2020, and under the terms and conditions under Part 6 of Title V Code of Federal Regulations as in effect on September 30th, 2020. Section 6.2, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. Actually, I need to go to the Code of Federal Regulations. We're in the wrong place. That's why. Awesome. So we found it. In any of the schedules, A through E, as described in Section 6.2. So any of these, schedules A through E, so these are describing the type of positions other than those of a confidential or policy determining character for which it is not practicable to examine shall be listed in Schedule A. So schedules of accepted positions, OPM shall list positions that it accepts from the competitive service in Schedules A, B, C, D, E. Policy, career, and G, which schedules shall constitute parts of this rule follows. Schedule B, positions other than those of confidential or policy determining character for which it is not practicable to hold a competitive examination shall be listed in Schedule B. Appointments to those positions shall be subject to such non-competitive examination. Schedule C. Schedule D. So when a position is in the accepted services, OPM organizes it into these schedules. And in the bill, we're seeing A through E being very particular. Think of them as like buckets, right? Each bucket has two questions. Is it a political position? Is this job hard to fill through standard competitive exams? Schedule A is not political, hard to examine through standard testing. Schedule B, not political. Policy starts to enter in Schedule C. Positions of confidential or policy determining character normally subject to change as a result of presidential transition shall be listed in C. D, student recent graduate pathways, temporary recruitment, flexibility, not political. E, administrative law judges. They are in accepted service for structural independence reasons. They still operate with legal protections. G, policy-making roles that do normally change with presidential transactions. The president changes, this role changes. That is normal. Those would be Schedule G positions. We have E here, and then there's usually F, right? And then under the terms and conditions under Part 6 of this title code, so this is where we've been for this one. That's great. So then we've got Part 6. Under the terms and conditions under Part 6, this is assignment and movement of persons between the systems. Okay. Transfers. Within Accepted service. A position in the accepted service may not be transferred to any schedule other than a schedule described in subsection B1. And that would be B1 here. Limitations. A position in the competitive service may not be accepted from the competitive service unless that position is placed in any of schedules A through E as described in sections 6.2 of the Federal Code. So we're getting into the A through E. It's not talking about G yet. OPM consent required. An agency may not transfer any occupied position from the competitive service or the accepted service into Schedule C of Subpart C of Part 213 of Title V Code of Federal Regulations or any successor regulations without prior consent of the director. So that is also here. So we know 213 of Title V of the Code of Federal Regulations, and it is saying accept or the accepted service into Schedule C of Subpart C. Let's go look at that. Schedule C of Subpart C, positions of a confidential or policy determining character. Limit during presidential term. During any 4-year presidential term, an agency may not transfer from a position in the competitive service to a position in the accepted service of the greater of the following. A total number of employees that is more than 1% of the total number of employees employed by that agency as the first day of the presidential term. B, 5 employees. Employee consent required. Notwithstanding any other provision of this section, an employee who occupies a position in the accepted service may not be transferred to the accepted service schedule other than the schedule in which that position is located without the prior consent of the employee. And B, an employee who occupies a position in the competitive service may not be transferred to the accepted service without the prior written consent of the employee. Other matters, application notwithstanding section 38 USA. Oh, you can go back to Title 38, 7425B of Title 38 of the United States Code. This section shall apply to a position under Chapter 73 or 74 of that title. Report. Not later than March 15th of each calendar year, the director shall submit to Congress a report on the immediately preceding calendar year that lists each position that during the year covered by the report was transferred from the competitive service to the accepted service, and a justification as to why each such position was so transferred, and B, any violation of this section that occurred during the year covered by the report. Regulations on this, not later than 90 days after the date of enactment of this act, the director shall issue regulations to implement this section. So that is the bill, and as we're breaking it down, it appears that the main things these sponsors are trying to prevent is reclassification of career civil servants. So they can't just move from competitive to accepted, especially in a chunk, without the employee's approval. You can't take large numbers of competitive service employees and then reclassify them into accepted service, and then you can take away their because competitive service employees have more protections than accepted service employees. And if you were to move them into a different class of employee, they would have less protections, and you could get rid of more of them at the same time. Senate Bill 134 freezes any classifications to what existed before before Schedule F was raised in 2020. So now we have to look at what Schedule F is. Schedule F was created through the executive order. Oh, You know, I remember reading this one last year. Let's go to Federal Hub Support, maybe, or the National Treasury Employees Union. Unions are a great place. Usually, a lot of times, unions can be a really good place to get information. Schedule Policy Career. What is Schedule Policy Career, formerly Schedule F? Schedule Policy Career is a federal employment category or schedule established by the current Trump administration via a January 2025 executive order. The order directs agency leaders to identify certain federal positions for reassignment from their current employment category into a new category. In February of 2026, it's February 2026 right now, the Office of Personnel Management finalized a rule to regulate Schedule Policy Career as directed by the January 2025 executive order. The OPM is issuing a rule to increase career employee accountability. Agency supervisors report great difficulty removing employees for poor performance or misconduct. The final rule authorizes agencies to move policy influencing positions into Schedule Policy Career. These positions will remain career jobs filled on nonpartisan basis, yet they will be at-will positions accepted from adverse action procedures or appeals. This will allow agencies to quickly remove employees from critical positions who engage in misconduct, perform poorly, or obstruct the democratic process by intentionally subverting presidential directives. The rule requires agencies to establish internal policies protecting employees from prohibited personnel practices. The effective date on this is March 9th. This one's going to be actually pretty important to go after pretty quickly. I remember reading this last year in January. Restoring accountability to policy influencing positions within the federal workforce. This is an executive order that the current administration has put forward. A critical aspect of this executive function is the responsibility to maintain professionalism and accountability within the civil service. This accountability is sorely lacking today. Only 41% of civil service supervisors are confident that they can remove an employee who engaged in insubordination or serious misconduct. Even fewer supervisors, 26%, are confident they can remove an employee for poor performance. Accountability is essential for all federal employees, but it is especially important for those who are in policy influencing positions. These personnel are entrusted to shape and implement actions that have significant impact on all Americans. Any power they have is delegated by the president, and they must be accountable to the president, who is the only member of the executive branch, other than the vice president, elected and directly accountable to the American people. In recent years, however, there have been numerous and well-documented cases of career federal employees resisting and undermining the policies and directives of their executive leadership. Principles of good administration, therefore, necessitate action to restore accountability to the career civil service, beginning with positions of confidential policy making or policy advocating character. Replace the letter F, so that's why it's not on here when we were in 6.2. That's why it says Schedule Policy Career instead of Schedule F. Career positions of a confidential policy determining, policy making, or policy advocating character not normally subject to change as a result of presidential transition shall be listed in Schedule Policy Career. In appointing an individual to a position in Schedule Policy Career, each agency shall follow the principle of veteran preference as far as administratively feasible. What this is wanting to do, replace the letter F throughout when used to designate as an accepted service schedule with the words policy career. Remove the text. So these have been changes already made. Recommend that the president immediately after the words petition the director. So moving who can change this role to the president. Insert a new subsection. Employees in or applicants for scheduled policy career positions are not required to personally or politically support the current president or the policies of the current administration. They are required to faithfully implement administrative policies to the best of their ability, consistent with their constitutional oath and the vesting of executive authority solely in the president. Failure to do so is grounds for dismissal. This is saying if you don't support what the president would like, you can be fired. And again, federal employees swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a president. Okay, so we learned some very interesting information together because I certainly didn't know that there had just been more of a directive by the OPM signed and that it was to take effect on March 9th. I'm wondering now, and what we have to definitely talk about now is why does it matter if a group of federal jobs moves from a competitive service over to the accepted service? And why does it matter if that section of Schedule F is now called Schedule Policy Career? It sounds administrative. It sounds a little bit paperworky, HR. It actually matters a ton because those competitive service jobs are merit-based jobs. People worked really hard to get into those jobs. They had to take the competitive exams. These were not some easy job to just be able to fill out. They were very competitive. That's why the name is competitive. Those are difficult jobs to fill. They come with very specific notice requirements. They come with appeal rights. You can't just fire someone who is in that job. They come with civil service protections. They create a process if someone is going to be let go from that job. And that is because of the work that those jobs do. They don't want someone who changes in the administration to come in and just move everybody out. These are the types of jobs that keep America running, right? These are the types of jobs that keep our government going and running. And that's why you can change a president every 4 years, every 8 years, and it can still run underneath that. It's because of civil service workers. That's who really runs the government. So if positions move out of those competitive civil service jobs into the accepted service, especially into this scheduled policy career, those protections change, and it makes those people easier to remove. If a small number of clearly political jobs shift, that's okay. That's normal. That's normal. That always happens. Schedule C, political appointments, that's very, very normal. Existed for decades and decades. Again, those are not the people who are keeping everything going when presidents change out every 4 to 8 years. If a large number of career policy roles are reclassified, that changes things immensely. All of their expertise and independent control that they have over the different areas that they have, that changes immediately. You want to have careers and people working in a government that are not appointed by a specific president, and they are there for the benefit of America and American people, not for the benefit of a president. So this really will be a constitutional argument. I think as this gets going, there will be appeals and we'll see some things in court. And that's why Senate Bill 134 is actually really important right now. And if that were to get taken up in Congress, Senate Bill 134 would be able to limit those reclassifications because it would be a statutory law, and a statute law supersedes an executive order. Members of Congress could hold hearings about this. The appropriations committees, they could be used to restrict any implementation. Appropriations means money, so funding might change, and that could hold this back. and voters making their voices known about Senate Bill 134, about the executive order, about the OPM order as well. This is what we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks. Democracy doesn't just show up at the ballot box. That's not where we make a whole lot of changes. That's where we can make some really big noticeable changes. But most of the time, it's in these classification codes that most people never ever read. And when we start to get into those, then we can see where changes in our local, state, and federal government really do take place right under our noses. But what do we need to do with this information? Right now, it has a very favorable opinion across the United States. Let's talk about the Kialo discussion, and then let's talk about contacting your representative, right? The Saving the Civil Service Act aims to prevent exceptions to competitive service positions requiring adherence to specific federal regulations. In it addresses limitations on transferring positions within federal agencies, ensuring positions remain within competitive service unless classified under specific schedules. This bill seeks to maintain integrity and fairness in federal employment practices. The pros, people are talking about here, pros of this bill, the Saving the Civil Service Act, restricts arbitrary changes in employment statuses, promoting fairness and transparency in federal hiring and promotion processes, protects employee rights by requiring consent for transfers from a competitive service to the accepted service positions. It ensures consistent standards across federal employment by maintaining positions within competitive service unless otherwise classified. There was this really great TV show, Death by Lightning. Death by Lightning, a historical drama. I think it was on Netflix, maybe. And it was about James A. Garfield. I learned so much information from this and then wanted to look up a whole lot of things later. He was the 20th president of the United States, and he was assassinated shortly after he became president. He had a lot of anti-corruption and pro-civil rights stances. One of the very, very interesting things that ties back to civil service about President Garfield is that he was shot by someone. He was assassinated by someone who felt like they should get a position on his team. And at this time, back then, people were just appointed into positions. It was, who did you know? And, oh, we want this person here, and I'm the new president, so I'm going to just appoint someone. What changed, the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, is what actually then changed things from the spoils system of to the victor, go the spoils, to requiring these competitive exams for certain federal positions and protecting employees from being fired for political reasons. And it created the Civil Service Commission. It started really small, but then it expanded to things that we know of, such as the Hatch Act that happened years later, and then the Civil Service Reform Act. Those together made expansions for federal employees to continue to be able to operate regardless of who was the president at that current time. We still operate under a lot of the 1978 framework. This is the first time in history that, again, civil service would be reclassified under a different way and shift things back to a loyalty base than a merit base. I think what we want to look at again, and more questions to ask again, are how much insulation should exist between expertise and politics. The person who's the president is not an expertise on the country. I mean, not just out of the gate, right? Depends on how long they have been there, who's on their team, what did they know before, what were their jobs before. I think it might be important to mention the top things that the civil service does, because maybe that's not something that people are familiar with. The civil service administers Social Security and disability benefits. Civil service provides health care to veterans, collects taxes and enforces tax law, protects public health with things like the CDC, enforces environmental regulations with the EPA, maintains national security and intelligence, regulates aviation safety, the FAA, manages disaster response, the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, investigates federal crimes with the DOJ, implements federal policy across agencies. A lot of things that people don't see, such as drafting regulations, writing guidance, reviewing grant applications, managing contracts, overseeing procurement, monitoring compliance of those things, regulatory writers, budget analysts, senior career advisors, agency legal reviewers. Civil service is the operational layer of the government. They're processing your benefits. They are monitoring your air quality. They are inspecting the aircraft that you fly on. They are tracking disease outbreaks. And they're turning legislation into functional systems. Those are roles that need expertise and understanding of how something works, and having that understanding for a very long time, and not being loyal to who's sitting in the room so much as what are the policies that need to be changed so the American people can have those best benefits possible. What is at stake here is the structural integrity of the American operation system as we know it. We need to contact our reps about this for sure. Why would people be against an act like this, Saving the Civil Service Act? It may limit agency discretion in addressing unique personnel needs, impacting efficiency and response capabilities. It could increase bureaucratic hurdles when modifying positions or transferring employees between service designations, may reduce flexibility for agencies needing to swiftly adapt to changing personnel requirements or emergencies, because this bill is functionally trying to say you can't put people over in Schedule F like that. You can't just turn it over. So we should contact our representatives. We have the new 2.0 VoteBot. So it's stuck in committee right now. We want our senators to get it out of that committee and then bring it to the floor and then have a vote on it, and we can see where it would go from there. Mostly we want our senators to know that we're looking at it. Of course, you're going to go to Ballot Ready to find your specific congressperson. We do this each week, which is super great. You're going to put in your address. And we haven't done Chicago yet. Whoop. Let's do Illinois. Now, if you remember, every single state has 2 congressional senators. So you're going to want to email or call both of them. It doesn't matter what your address and zip code is. You have 2 for the whole state. At the federal level, who are our 2 state senators? That is Richard Durbin and Tammy Duckworth. These are the 2 people that we would want to be reaching out to right now to say, hey, where is this bill? This stuff is about to happen. Are we talking about this? Have you heard about this? Okay, you can click on these and hit contact. We've got an email address that we can get to right away. So let's get back into VoteBot and find out what is the message we're going to send. Oh, VoteBot's being very thoughtful. Here's how you can take an action. It's going to tell me a little bit more about the bill, and then how to contact my senator, and what we can say. Here's some sample scripts. And of course, we would want to vote on it here inside the app in Digital Democracy Project. We could vote on it right in here from the web browser or from your mobile phone app. Something that you might want to say, hello, my name is, and I'm a constituent from your state. I'm reaching out to urge the senator, in this case we would say Duckworth or Durbin, to support the Saving the Civil Service Act and to push for the bill to be heard in committee as soon as possible. The legislation is important to me because even VoteBot knows civil servants are the backbone of government operations, handling everything from public safety and health to infrastructure and administration. Their work directly impacts the daily lives of Americans, and ensuring fairness and integrity in federal employment helps maintain a professional, effective civil service. If you like, I can include that in your message, and that would be amazing. So we can include that there. So, thank you, VoteBot. Whew. This was a long one, and I think there are some other pieces in here to also add in because we didn't deep dive into the civil service system. We didn't deep dive into the Hatch Act. I'm going to link those things too. What we do see here is something we've been talking about the whole time, which is we have to ask questions about the policies that shape our lives. Civil service shapes our American way of life, especially once we get into certain ages or especially for things we can't do ourselves. The EPA exists because otherwise big businesses would just do whatever they wanted. Chemical companies would do whatever they wanted. The FAA exists so planes can't just be built and put into the sky without specific regulations and safety regulations. FEMA exists because natural disasters happen and people need to have a response to those. There's a whole lot of other ones, that exist that we don't want to see polarized to one side or the other. We would want those to be places that take care of anybody in any state. Oh, FEMA is only going to go to these states and it's not going to go to any other states. All of us are the United States of America. FEMA is a federal emergency service agency for all states that are in America, not just ones that vote for the current administration. So I appreciate that this is the one that we've gotten into right here at our Chinese New Year. Democracy isn't just about what we can see on television. It is about structure and the structural integrity that runs an entire country. That, I think, for the most part, most of us here weren't around when those things were put together. And those are the things that are still holding up a lot of the structure right now today. So I will sign off there. This is Cassie. And this has been Coffee and Calculated Curiosity. I'm going to contact my senators, and I hope that you do the same. Thank you so much for having a sip with me. I'll see you in the channel.